Dr. Stefan Bean is going to be coming up here. So go ahead and unmute and come on up. There we go. And okay, I'm just looking at all the great things we have, and I'm so excited about your book and to highlight your work. So I'm going to hand it to Josh to kind of go over as a brief introduction, and then I'm going to ask some questions because I am like having a burning desire here to ask you for our audience.
Yeah. Well, I'll make it short for you, Charlie, because I know you're chomping at the bit to talk to Dr. Bean here. But this is an amazing person, Orange County Superintendent of Schools, nearly 3 decades as teacher, principal, district leader, and systems level innovator. He's got a brand new book, Lifted to Lead, which is absolutely amazing. It's compelling, and I want everyone to go out there and grab a copy because I know this is such an inspirational story, and he's such a strong advocate for so many different people, English learners, historically underserved students, and has just a phenomenal story that we're going to learn more about today. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to you, Charlie, because I know you want to ask Dr. Bean so many questions.
Yes. So first of all, you have a really incredible story. But first, thank you for being here. I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Charlie.
Yeah, I know you're a busy guy. You've got a lot on the go.
Somewhat, just a little bit.
Okay, so this truly is a big deal to have you. So your story is really powerful. And part of what you wrote in the book, I pulled some things out here. You wrote, I wasn't just left behind, I was abandoned. And yet it was that same moment that gave me a future. So people need to understand that that is a powerful underlying theme for your book. So how do those early experiences shape the way you think about mental health and support systems for students today? Big question to start with.
Wow, that's a really deep question. I think I'll start by saying is that no matter what mental health challenges a student may face or an individual may face, there is help around that individual. And surrounding yourself with people that can lift you through those challenges. That's an example of what I mean by this quote, because in the book I was literally abandoned on the streets of Saigon at the age of 2 because I contracted polio. And when I contracted polio, my parents couldn't take care of me during the Vietnam War, so they abandoned me on the streets of Saigon. And most people would say that was a travesty, and it was, but out of that came great opportunity for me because then I was later on airlifted out of Vietnam, out of the war, and brought to the United States to where I am right now.
Wow. Well, you had a story about a teacher in your book too. And so it was about them telling you a message about all I care about is that you become the best person you can be.
Yeah.
And so people, you really need to get out there and read this book because it is powerful. So how can leaders bring that mindset into schools? And this is important because we need to support educator well-being and reduce the burnout that they're feeling without adding more to their plate. So how do we do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not anything that would be cumbersome for any adult to actually begin looking at students through an asset perspective. And so Mr. Geisinger, my 6th grade teacher, and I talk about this in the book, he noticed that I had this gift. And so he pulled me aside. He said, Stefan, I don't care the fact that you're in a wheelchair, that you're barely speaking English, that you like to talk a lot. What I do know is that you have this gift of gab. And he noticed and he noticed within me this ability to communicate. And so he saw that strength and then he cultivated it. And it's actually led to what I am today, and that is an educational leader able to communicate what I've learned through my journey. And so what I would say to an educator or an adult is that when we look at students that come through our doors, look at them through strength-based asset perspective and not the baggage or the weaknesses that come with the student. And that's actually just a shift in mindset. So it's not asking for a cumbersome thing to do, but it's actually shifting the mindset and looking for the gifts and strengths in kids.
Love it. Okay, well, so here's another thing that kids are dealing with, and sometimes adults are dealing with this too, of the feeling of not belonging. And I know that that's part of a theme that you wrote about. So how has kind of that message stayed with you when someone told you that you don't belong here? And how did you create a culture of schools to have that belonging?
What a great question. So that's actually why I wrote this book, is because of that incident in 3rd grade, walking to class and being teased by my peers that, I was probably the only student with disability at that school, and had one of the boys pushed me against the wall while everybody entered the classroom and said, slapped me across the face and said, "Hey, you don't belong here." And as I reflect on my educational career, I decided I wanted to write the book to share with everybody that no one gets there alone. And so it really takes everybody to lift one another through those kinds of moments and challenge. And so when a child feels this sense of needing to belong, we need to take care of it very seriously as adults. And sometimes it just takes a whisper that says, "You can do it," or a pat on the back, "You're going to be okay." And that really goes a long way when a student knows that an adult notices them.
Right. That's amazing. Okay. So, and that's a big deal in our schools right now, and mental health, of course, but that starts with the leadership.
Yeah,
But it sounds like leadership, and again, this is another piece of your book you wrote. Leadership isn't about controlling the outcome; it's about lifting people up who um, make the difference, right? So make it happen. So,
yeah,
what does that actually look like in practice? Because people are overwhelmed, and they do look to their leaders. So, what
yeah.
should they do?
Great. So, I've been around hundreds and hundreds of leaders, and sometimes we leaders want to be the first to climb up that career ladder. So what I like to tell people is, instead of trying to be the first up that ladder, actually you should be the one holding that ladder to actually lift others to get up that ladder so they can climb. And so as leaders, we can do that by taking a very um, servant-like leadership perspective. The L in lifting is begin with listening and learn from others. The I is inspire potential in our colleagues and our teachers and our students. The F is foster authenticity as a leader. If you want others to follow you, then be real with them, be authentic with them. And then the T is know that you can transform any situation through hope and realistic hope. And so when you use that acronym of LIFT in your leadership, it becomes others focused and lifting others versus lifting your own positionality.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, leaders really do need those tools and the strategy, but they need the encouragement like that. So I think it's important that they hear this message. It's so important.
Yeah.
And there's also resiliency that we need. And
Yes.
so, right, it sounds like you never lost faith, though. It sounded like you were incredibly resilient. So, how can you pass that along? And how does that belief connect to kind of the practical experience we need to have?
Well, I think that people just need to understand that we all go through challenges and obstacles. And, in this book, Lifted to Lead, it just really, it's and not just this journey, but it's the ups and downs of all of our lives and being resilient and getting through them, and being lifted above those situations. So what I always tell people is just have hope. And I've been asked many times, "Hey, how did you get over those surgeries, especially that back surgery that you had that put you in a cast from neck all the way down to ankle for 9 months, right? Laying on my back or my stomach." And I said, "That's a great question." And as I reflect on it, I got through those situations because I had a vision of hope for the very next day,
8 Rosemont Drive. Yes.
the very next day when my cast was going to be taken off, because I knew when that cast was going to be taken off, wow, I would have freedom and my life would be back to normal. And so we can be faced with so many challenges, and just know there's help out there, and to have hope that you will overcome it and what that would look like once you do.
Right. Yeah, that hope. So many people are losing hope in our system today, but we can't. There's so much we have to do for kids and truly the future generation here. And Josh, I'm going to throw it back to you because I know you had a couple of questions here about this for Dr. Bean, and I think I'll just pass it back to you. I know there's so
Yeah.
much we can
I'm gonna
learn.
I'm gonna close it down for you, Dr. Bean. So I know with the school student behavior summit that we've got going on, a lot of folks, as the school year is ending, are seeing an increase in referrals and some of the student behavior, especially after state testing, as you know. So, as far as schools go and systems, is there anything that is often a misunderstanding in regards to student behavior, specifically around this time frame?
Well, yeah, actually, sometimes it's what we hear in research is that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we
Yeah.
keep thinking that something's going to happen, it's going to continue, it's going to actually happen. And so if we have this mindset, okay, well, we just get out of spring break and now we have all this testing, we know what our students going to act like, well, then we're going to fulfill that prophecy. They're going to actually misbehave, right? Because we're going to subconsciously allow it to happen. So I would say change that mindset and break that self-fulfilling prophecy and say, you know what, we know that testing is a challenge. So what can we do to engage our students in between testing? Or how do we make it even easier for kids to engage in testing? How do we support our parents? Because we know there's a lot of pressure around testing. And how do we take those moments of pause and mental health breaks during these long stretches of testing between now and the end of the school year? So there are proactive activities and strategies that you could find certainly on AI or even online to break up the monotony of testing. Look, when students misbehave, they misbehave because they're disengaged, they're not interested, and they're being and quite frankly bored. And so if we can change that and engage them in rich, meaningful activities around testing, I think a lot of that would change.
For sure. I want to talk about your advocacy work because I know you're doing a lot of initiatives within your district to make sure that every student feels like they belong. So will you just talk about, the work that you've been doing for so long to make sure that every single kid that walks through the doors within your system is feeling like they belong there, they're being seen, and they're welcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, because I feel like I was one of those students who I was in foster care, then adopted, I was an English or multilingual learner. Uh, I struggled through what many of our current vulnerable students struggled through. And so it is a priority at the where I work is what we call the 531. And the five is five initiatives that focus our support on how do we help the most vulnerable. So let me give you one example. When you think about career technical education, students having access to that, the true data shows that only slightly above 30% of our English learners have access to career technical education. And just maybe slightly above 40% of our students with disabilities have access to CTE. And the irony is that many of our multilingual learners and students with disabilities, they may not want to go to and through college. Instead, they would want to go into the trades. And so one of our goals is to increase participation rates of the most vulnerable when in terms of access and opportunities in career technical education.
So I touched on your book just a little bit, Lifted the Lead. It's a beautiful and brilliant resource, but I would love for you just to share about the vision behind it and why you wrote it.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. I think all of us can agree that no one gets there alone. We all have journeys and paths we take, and to get to where we want to go, we need people around us. And so the book is more than just a memoir. It's actually a leadership guide to help us as adults lift our students. So if I could just give you a quick analogy, I had classrooms on the second floor in high school, and there was no elevator. So every morning I would get there at the bottom of the stairs, and there'd be four of my friends waiting to lift me up those stairs every day. And later they told me we didn't do it because we didn't feel sorry for you, we didn't pity you, but we did it so that you could get to where we're going. And so that's what this book is all about, is that no one gets there alone. So people need to come alongside our students and lift them over those barriers, especially the mental health barriers that they face.
All right. So we like to ask all of our guests here about actionable items. So, Dr. Bean, for our leaders, or regardless of the educator title, like what is something they can do that you feel like is going to really shape or shift the way that school leaders are impacting their campus or their district?
So Josh, that's a pretty good question. Ask it in another way.
Yeah, of course. So, we are serving a lot of folks that are watching this, right, all over the country, and they're coming with, some value as far as what you're saying, but we want them to take the next step, right? So maybe it's connected to your book, maybe something connected to the advocacy piece, but we want them to go and do something to enhance their either their leadership journey or their educational journey. So I'm just wondering if there's something that you would recommend.
Yeah, I would say answer when making a decision, test it through this litmus test. Are you lifting an individual and a community with your decision, or are you limiting someone with your decision? And so we obviously all want to lift the people around us, because when we lift individuals, we're going to lift communities. When we lift communities, we're going to lift our country. And so it's really about, are you lifting or limiting? And that's a great test for any leader to ask themselves when they go into a decision-making process.
I'm going to throw it back to Charlie because she was messaging me because she's got another question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just so much we can do here. So I like to understand the future of education from your vision. And
Yeah.
I know you have a great plan that you mentioned, but what is your future long-term vision for education and how can we get there?
Well, we can get there by recognizing that we're in a moment in history of mankind that innovation is exponentially growing, whether it's AI, right, or innovative products. And so as educators, we need to grasp that reality, that to accept it, because our kids are already, for instance, using AI. And so I think that the next generation of leaders has to be future facing leader, and understanding the future of education, the future of our community, and grasping it and helping our students implement it responsibly and ethically. And so the next 5 years for our Department of Education, the 5-3-1 plan is built around forward-facing, future-facing programs and supports for our districts.
Awesome. I mean, there's so much to that, but that makes it sound so reachable, just so reachable. So people who would like to get your book, first of all, how could leaders use your book? How could they best utilize your book when they have it in their hands?
You know, at the end of every chapter, there's a reflection question around the lifted leadership framework, and you can use it as a study guide for a group of employees or team. And there's a framework, rich framework in there that really flips our understanding of leadership from one of driving, right, the bus, to one of actually helping others to drive the work. And so that's what this whole lifted framework, leadership framework, very applicable in real estate, businesses, education. In fact, I've done plenty of keynotes. Just did a keynote among bus drivers, right? And this leadership framework of lifted really was applicable for them. And so leaders can get the book certainly from Amazon, Lifted to Lead. And if they want it as a for their entire team, then they can go to liftedtolead.com and order a book, get the bulk sale price.
Great. Great. And we are actually going to give 5 books away on your behalf. Your team told us we could do that.
Yes.
So, yes. So we're going to give away 5 books, and here's how you all can do it. So listen up. So the first 5 people who email me, that's going to come to my email, and I'm going to notify them. The first 5 people to share their key takeaway from this interview will get a book mailed to you. So you do need to be in the US, I believe. I think, or I don't know, you guys might be international. But people are really going to want this. So if you don't win the book, you can go to thrivingeducator.org/speakers. It's there. Or we also have Dr. Bean's website, which we're dropping in here. We will follow up as well, because not only will you want this book for yourself, you will want this for your whole team. You will want to buy this in bulk, and that is available on the website too. Josh is going to put that in the chat as well, but we will follow up. Dr. Bean, is there anything else that we've missed that you really need to just make sure everybody hears before we go?
You know what? I think I said it before, but just I love to say it over and over, that no one gets there alone. And no matter if we're a CEO of an organization or a student entering our school system, we all need people to surround us like my friends did to lift us up those stairs. And as a CEO, best way we can do that is by lifting our teams. And so I just encourage that people listen and learn, inspire potential, transform through hope, and then foster authenticity. So I think I did it and mixed it up in the letter, but you guys get the gist. And I think that when we focus on lifting others, oh my goodness, it opens up endless possibilities for an organization and for a student.
Great. Well, you are just making incredible strides in education, which we so much need. And this is for leaders. Leaders, you have plenty of information there to start with. Dr. Bean, thank you so much for your time. We know you're super busy. Thank you. We will make sure the viewers get the books when they email me their key takeaway. Thank you again. You take care.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you.